Welcome to PatsCast. This is what we've been waiting for. The New England Patriots dominate the Carolina Panthers 42-13, and I think we were expecting the Patriots perhaps to win this game, maybe even win by a couple of scores, but heading into the locker room at halftime up 28-6, this is the type of game we've been waiting for a long time. And frankly, the Patriots, they should be 3-1 right now if it weren't for, of course, the 5 turnovers last week against Pittsburgh, where they were very productive. Aside from those turnovers, the defense stumbled out of the gate, but made adjustments and played a pretty good game. And we saw a similar story today, where the defense struggling on the first drive of the game, and the offense remained productive, but they didn't turn the football over. Drake May, no interceptions, no fumbles. Ramondre Stevenson out there starting. Didn't love that at first, but he didn't turn the ball over. Same with Antonio Gibson. So a perfect game turnover-wise for the Patriots, and it's really hard to pick apart this performance for various flaws. I mean, certainly there were some penalty issues, and, Drake May not super accurate out of the locker room at halftime. Early on in the game, they went 3 and out, but other than that, it was a near-perfect game for the Patriots. So kudos to Mike Vrabel. Kudos to Josh McDaniels for putting together really a spectacular offensive game plan that really kept the defense on their toes in Carolina. Now, this is a victory, of course, to take with a grain of salt. Carolina is not a very good football team. I know they won 30-0 last week against the Atlanta Falcons, but they had a lot of injuries that game. Really, they had one decent wide receiver, Tet McMillan, out there, who's a rookie, and then the Patriots had Christian Gonzalez back out there, Carlton Davis, and they were able to stop them. But more importantly, it wasn't just that the Carolina receivers weren't getting open. Patriots were getting a lot of pressure to Bryce Young throughout the game. Even though there was just one sack, he was rattled right from the get-go, at least after that first drive from Carolina. So really impressive performance by the Patriots, and a great confidence builder as they head into Buffalo next week for a very challenging Sunday night matchup, and the Bills, of course, are 4-0 now, but look, like I said, this should be a team that's 3-1. This is a team that's heading in the right direction, cleaning up the mistakes, had, 7 penalties today. Like to see a little less than that. Most of those came in the first half. They got a lot more buttoned up later in the game, but contributions all around, right? This was a 3-phase victory for the Patriots, and that doesn't start with Drake May. It doesn't start with the offense. It doesn't start with the defense. It starts on special teams. Of course, Andy Borregales didn't miss any kicks, so we got the guy. I don't think that's the key takeaway from this game, but Borregales looked pretty good. But more importantly, on special teams, Marcus Jones, incredible job out there. Really ignited the football team. They went down 7-0 after Carolina had a very impressive opening game drive and then weren't able to do anything the rest of the game. Patriots go 3 and out on offense. Defense makes a stop, and then Marcus Jones, 87 yards, runs it back for a touchdown, ignited the crowd, ignited the rest of the team, and the Patriots scored 42 straight points after that return for a touchdown for Marcus Jones. So great job for him. He certainly deserves a game ball. I'm sure Vrabel's handing him out at this point in time, but knowing the way Vrabel hands out game balls, he'll probably give it to Andy Borregales once again. And then, of course, Marcus Jones had a 61-yard return, almost a touchdown, but he ended up getting tackled by the actual punter there, so I'm sure his teammates gave him hell for that, but really impressive game for Marcus Jones, and, he's always been an impactful punt returner, but special teams didn't just complement the win today, they ultimately set the tone, and head coaches love that. Mike Vrabel loves that, Bill Belichick loved that. If your special teams can ignite the rest of your team, your football team's heading in the right direction. And more importantly, I think on offense, we finally started to see a lot of explosive plays out there. And that really starts with Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs had a career game in New England. I mean, he hasn't done a ton, but he's been a decent contributor through the first 3 weeks of the season. Led the team in receiving by far. 6 catches. The next player had 2 catches, and that was Hunter Henry and Travion Henderson. So 6 catches for Stefon Diggs for 101 yards. Still yet to get in the end zone, but 6 catches, on 7 targets, 101 yards, averaged 17 yards per catch, including a 33-yard play. Go watch it back. Drake May threw it to Stefon Diggs while Diggs was still running his route. Great back shoulder throw. Got it near the goal line, set them up for an easy touchdown. So excellent job there by Diggs. And I think, I've been giving a lot of heat to Demario Douglas on this podcast the last few weeks and hoping the Patriots would make some adjustments because clearly it's not working out with Douglas at slot receiver as we all expected it to after really a tremendous training camp and a great first 2 seasons from Douglas. And that was an adjustment that the Patriots made. Not only did Douglas not have a catch all game, he wasn't even targeted once. So Stefon Diggs really took that lead slot receiver type role. Didn't mean they didn't line him up on the outside at times, but for the most part, Diggs was playing in the slot a lot like they did in Houston last year before he got hurt. That's kind of been a late career adjustment for him. He was more of a boundary explosive type receiver in Minnesota and Buffalo. And then, of course, you had Nico Collins in Houston, so they kicked Diggs into the inside in the slot. And he did a great job until the ACL injury, and that's where Josh McDaniels is using him. So a little disappointed not to see Efton Chisholm back out there. He was inactive once again, but you don't need him if Stefon Diggs is going to put up 100 yards, average 17 yards a catch, and have those explosive plays like he did today. And, that sets up other opportunities on the outside, whether that's Kayshon Boutte or, Kyle Williams, I don't think he got any targets today. But just a lot that the Patriots did on offense. Of course, McDaniels has really modernized his offense. It's a perfect balance, seemingly, between the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, wide zone, West Coast type offense, and, the old school Earhart Perkins that McDaniels has run as a coach his entire career. And I just love it. It works great. I mean, it's not like the Patriots are a great zone running team, but it sets up those bootlegs, puts Drake May on his feet, and allows him to make some plays, and that led to some touchdowns, whether it was the dump to Hunter Henry, where he hit Henry in a tight window with pressure coming to both players, and then Henry marched down the field for a touchdown. By the way, that play, and I know I'm criticizing Demario Douglas a lot, go watch what Demario Douglas does on that play. This guy's like 5'6", 5'7". He goes out there and blocks 2 defensive players on Carolina, which set up the lane for Hunter Henry to get in the end zone. So as much as we've been criticizing Demario Douglas and have been very disappointed about his lack of production, and I don't have a lot of optimism for him, he is doing the little things, including blocking for a player that really is not built to be a blocking NFL-type player. He ultimately set up that Hunter Henry touchdown. So even though Douglas didn't get as many reps at the slot role, he did what he was asked to do, and it set up a big touchdown. So that's the type of complimentary football that you want to see. Other big plays, of course, Austin Hooper, 24 yards on a screen pass. There was Antonio Gibson, Ramondre Stevenson, who both had 20-plus yard runs. Talked about Stefon Diggs. Hunter Henry had the 31-yard touchdown on the bootleg from Drake May. Just a tremendous athletic play by May, and his accuracy, again, he struggles early in the game. He struggles early in the third quarter when he's fresh, when he's not sweating, when he's not running around out there. But once he settles in, Drake May is a very accurate quarterback, and he has been. I don't know where he's going to be after this game, but he had the second highest completion percentage in the NFL heading into week 4, just behind Justin Herbert, struggling quite a bit today against the New York Giants. So maybe Drake May, I don't know what his completion percentage was today. Yeah, 14 of 17. Drake May might have the highest completion percentage in the NFL after today. We'll have to see what the numbers actually are when week 4 becomes a wrap. But yeah, 31-yard touchdown to Hunter Henry. Mac Hollins had a nice quick slant over the middle for a 4-yard touchdown after that 30-yard strike to Stefon Diggs, which was a 4th down play, by the way. But really just, they didn't ask Drake May to do too much, but the things that he did were a very high degree of difficulty. And, the good thing with May, you weren't asking him to throw the ball, 50-plus times like they did week 1 against the Raiders, where they just basically abandoned the offensive game plan. They stopped doing that crap. In fact, Drake May only threw the football 17 times today, and still, 14 completions, still had 203 yards throwing the football 17 times. And then, of course, he added 11 yards rushing, including a touchdown rush on the boot there. So, really hard to complain about what Drake May did out there. Very efficient game. What's his passer rating? Yeah, 156 passer rating. Yeah, so that's basically a perfect game for Drake May. I would say, his best game of the year, of course, was the game at Miami. He didn't turn the football over there, made a number of clutch plays. Wasn't asked to do as much today in week 4, but in terms of efficiency, this was probably the best game of his career. So, kudos to Drake May and kudos to Josh McDaniels. I mean, my biggest critique of McDaniels, and, it was this way for however many years with Tom Brady, is the, death by 1,000 paper cuts where you have 17 play drives and you hope that you're going to get in the end zone. Well, that doesn't work out very well if, you have to settle for a field goal, or like last week, you turn it over in the end zone, you fumble the ball, you have Drake May throw an interception. You need some explosive chunk plays. And the Patriots had a really good balance there today between running the football, setting yourself up for short yardage situations, and still getting those explosive plays. And that's why you brought in Stefon Diggs, right? Stefon Diggs, for the first time today, really looked like there were no lingering health concerns. That knee looks 100%, and he's going to be heading into a revenge game next week against the Buffalo Bills. So great game for Stefon Diggs and a great game for the offense overall. As for the running game, very balanced attack. As we heard Mike Vrabel said, we're going to need Ramondre Stevenson out there. We have 3 very different running backs. You got the power back in Ramondre Stevenson. You have kind of the versatile, can do whatever you ask back of Antonio Gibson. And then Travion Henderson, who is the dynamic, explosive playmaker, who's also a decent blocking and pass-catching back. They all contributed, and they all averaged over 4 yards per carry. That's what you want to see. Stevenson led the way with 9 carries for 38 yards, had a 22-yard run at one point. Travion Henderson, 32 yards on 7 carries, and Antonio Gibson, 27 yards on 6 carries, also had a 21-yard gain at one point. So, really good balanced attack. The run game clicked with that committee approach. They've always had a committee approach with Josh McDaniels, but Stevenson redeemed himself. There was a point where he went to the ground and only had one arm on the football that I was screaming at the television when it happened. But, hey, he didn't turn the ball over once all game and didn't even come close, it seemed like, to turning it over. So, really good game there. I mentioned Stefon Diggs became the wide receiver number 1 today, which was important, right? You have Kayshon Boutte, who kind of was Drake May's go-to receiver outside of the tight end positions last year, and it seemed to start that way this year. But Boutte hasn't been targeted a lot each of the last 3 weeks, only had 1 catch for 18 yards today, and Diggs made up for a lot of that. Like I said, 6 catches for 101 yards. There are no chemistry issues there between Stefon Diggs and Drake May. I mean, those two just seem to click right away, and we saw it on that 30-yard gain on 4th down. Reduced snaps for Demario Douglas. We're going to see what ends up happening with him long term, but they ultimately leaned on Stefon Diggs, Mac Hollins, big physical blocker, had a touchdown today, and then Kayshon Boutte, who, is not going to be like a high-volume guy, never will be, but can be a big play receiver on the outside. And hopefully you can start to work Kyle Williams in there a little bit. Maybe a little bit of competition between Williams and Boutte down the road, or Williams and Mac Hollins, although Mac Hollins is a little bit of a different receiver. And then, look, I'm still going to be harping on Efton Chisholm. I do want to see him on that active roster at some point. But considering the Patriots put up 42 points today, well, I guess, 35 of that came on offense. But 35 points on offense today, I would expect Efton Chisholm probably to be inactive once again heading into next week. But really, I think the story of the game, outside of, Stefon Diggs and Drake May's efficiency and the lack of turnovers, was the defense. The defense, I don't know what it is out of the gate. I think they've allowed a touchdown on the first drive of each game this season. And they did that once again. Carolina opened with a great early game script, 76-yard touchdown drive. Just said to myself, here we go again. This is going to be another rough one. And then the Patriots offense went 3 and out. It wasn't looking good, but the defense really stepped up after that point. Going to have to see the tape to see what adjustments they made or if they just kind of stuck to the game plan overall. It could just be Carolina, we see what teams do all the time. They have a very strong early game script, and then once they have to they get into the second quarter or midway through the first quarter, and they have to pick with the toolbox that they have on offense, then they start to struggle. It may just be a case of that, but it wasn't a clear-cut thing like Miami where it was, we're playing too much man, we need to go to zone, we're protecting the middle too much, we got to defend the boundary. It looked like the defense it was bend but don't break. Carolina I think they got over the 50-yard line on each possession in the first half, but, Barmore, Harold Landry, K'Lavon Chaisson, I know the Patriots only had 1 sack all game, but, they were pressuring Bryce Young on nearly every play and forcing him into mistakes, forcing the Carolina offense into quick punts. Of course, Christian Gonzalez returned in today's game. It really helped that Carolina didn't have any receivers other than Tet McMillan to throw the ball to, so you could just have Gonzalez go one-on-one against Tet McMillan and let the DBs carry the rest, and it really did work out. Gonzalez gave up just 31 yards on 3 targets, and I think half of those yards came on just one play early in the game where it was one-on-one. So, good game there. I think really the only weak spot I'd have to say was safety Craig Woodson. He did make a couple of plays, but he was beaten on both of the Panthers' touchdowns today, and he may have had a penalty, I'm not sure. But overall, really, really hard to complain about this defense and the way they played. The tackling, after you got out of that first drive, looked a lot better. So shaky first drive, but ultimately the defense overwhelmed Bryce Young and only gave up late points to backups there in garbage time. So really strong game from the defense. Also, I haven't mentioned this on the podcast. Of course, Terrell Williams was diagnosed with prostate cancer, the Patriots defensive coordinator. So wishing good health for him long term. We'll have to see if he's back out there at some point this season. Obviously that's a heavy diagnosis, so maybe not. But the defense didn't skip a beat, really. And I thought the defense played pretty well last week as well, and they struggled early against Miami and made some great adjustments. So you're looking at 2.5 weeks now of strong defensive play from the Patriots. And the tackling, like I said, has gotten significantly better. They look a lot more fundamentally sound. Looks like they're playing Kyrus Tonga a lot more on the defensive line. Big dude, but moves very well. And then, of course, Harold Landry is just a beast. He's really having a comeback year, playing once again with Mike Vrabel. So, really great game overall by the defense, and Carolina put up 13, but in reality, they only put up 6 or 7, if you count the extra point there that was missed. The offensive line, I think it should be noted that the Panthers were down both of their starting edge rushers, and they came into this game with just 1 sack on the season. So, 1 sack through 3 games, and they got another today, so just two sacks through 4 games. Defense don't have a great pass rush there in Carolina, and when you're missing your starting edge rushers, it's not going to look good. But Patriots offensive line took advantage of it. Will Campbell continues to look like the best offensive lineman coming out of this year's NFL draft. We'll be interested to see what the PFF grade is, but heading into week 4, he was the best according to Pro Football Focus. But they ran the ball efficiently, clearing plenty of blocking lanes there for the running backs. Also worth noting that Jared Wilson was out with an injury, so Ben Brown, former center last year, was actually starting at left guard. Didn't see any issues there from what I saw. Michael Wenu looked good. Morgan Moses had a couple of great key blocks that set up some big run plays. And Garrett Bradbury, the guy who we were all talking about throughout training camp, like, this guy is not going to cut it at center. We stopped talking about Garrett Bradbury after week 1, so he's done a very efficient job out there. It's going to be different next week against Buffalo, right? I mean, they can get to the quarterback a little better, certainly better than this Carolina Panthers team. But that's going to be a great test for the Patriots. And look, I'm not expecting a win going on the road Sunday Night Football into Buffalo, but this is moral victory territory, right? If the Patriots can indeed keep it a competitive game late into the fourth quarter, I think you can chalk that up as a moral victory. But look, they won 42-13 against a team that won 30-0 last week. I know they're banged up, but that is the confidence builder you need going up against the Buffalo Bills, who are either the first or second best team in the NFL right now, although they struggled quite a bit today against the New Orleans Saints, who aren't very good. So potential opening there for the Patriots to steal a win in Buffalo. I don't think it's going to happen, but this is the type of game you want heading into that big test for New England and Mike Vrabel's first season as head coach. Now, Mike Vrabel, of course, said on the Greg Hill show a couple of weeks ago that he doesn't really care that much about penalties. He was the penalty Nazi over in Tennessee until he looked at the analytics and found out that penalties don't make that much of a difference. I kind of disagree with that because, in my opinion, penalties cost the Patriots week 1 and nearly cost them in week 2. And, there were some bad penalties last week against Pittsburgh. The turnovers are what cost the Patriots there. But that's something they still need to button up a little bit. They had 7 today. Carlton Davis was called for a painful defensive pass interference early in the game against Ted McMillan. There was a questionable face mask call on Austin Hooper that hurt the team early on and nearly took them out of field goal range. Luckily, a Carolina penalty saved the Patriots, and they were able to get into the end zone. But that needs to improve. Henderson had a holding call. And, Patriots ultimately controlled the game, but the penalties they do need to clean up just a little bit. And the Carolina Panthers, they had 5 penalties of their own and, gave up plenty of free yards with offsides. And of course, there was that bad tripping penalty, which came after the Austin Hooper face mask and set up the Patriots touchdown there. So, is there a lot to criticize coming out of this game? Of course not. They won 42-13. Defense played well. Special teams ignited the rest of the team. And of course, the offense was very efficient with a balanced attack on the ground and in the air. But, clean up the penalties. Know that you're going up against better receivers. Not great receivers, but better receivers next week against Buffalo. They got great tight ends. Dalton Kincaid, among others. That's going to be a tough one. I think the tight ends, they're going to really have to take a similar approach to what they did in Miami, right? Is protect the middle of the field. If the Bills make plays on the boundary, so be it. But force them to dink and dunk all game, throw it to the outside, and maybe Josh Allen might make a mistake, which he is prone to do at times, although he's been pretty good so far this year. There's a reason the Bills are 4-0. But 42-13, the New England Patriots have a big bounce-back victory against the Carolina Panthers, improved to 2-2. Again, should be 3-1 if they hadn't shot themselves in the foot 5 times against the Steelers. But we're going to stay positive here at PatsCast. We're going to stay positive coming off of the game that we've been looking for the Patriots to do in a long time. This is the most they've scored since 2022 when they scored 50 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we were all ready to pay Mac Jones $30 million a year. Thank goodness that did not happen. But I think this is an offense that should have had at least 30 points last week. They scored over 30 the week before and, had a disappointing week 1 performance. They're explosive enough. They have one of the better running back rooms in the NFL, despite the fumbles from Stevenson and Gibson. The offensive line, I think, is a lot better than we were expecting, although the competition today, it's really hard to tell. But, Stefon Diggs stepping into that wide receiver number 1 role. Drake May continues to be one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. Didn't make any real mistakes today. Hard not to feel optimistic coming out of this game. And then once you play Buffalo, what do you have? You have the Saints, you have the Browns, you have the Falcons, you have a bunch of really winnable games. The Titans, let's say they drop to 2-3 next week. Patriots have a schedule where they should be able to win 4 games in a row if they play like the way they did today. And that puts you at what? 6-3? I know, it's premature, too early to tell, but this should be a playoff team. I'm not saying they're going to win the division against Buffalo. We'll find out next week just how competitive this Patriots team is. But they have the talent, they have the coaching, I think they have the quarterback now, and maybe even the offensive line, and perhaps the defense as well, who continue to look better week after week. This should be a playoff team, and maybe a team that can even earn a playoff victory. Going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out. We'll be here at PatsCast to cover it, but if you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments, are you optimistic after this game? What do you think the Patriots are going to put up next week on the road in Buffalo on Sunday night? I'm curious to hear from you, and if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll be back this week with more New England Patriots coverage.